Hi, my name's Kylie, and I'm a web developer and designer in beautiful downtown Decatur, Georgia. Today, I'd like to just do some practice with you. We're going to practice web design, web development. We're going to use TailwindCSS along with Next.js, which is a React.js framework, and we're just going to practice. This is something that I think would be most helpful if you look in the description below and click the link that has the code sandbox. It'll pull up a code sandbox that looks exactly like this, and you can follow along with me and type along with me, and that way we can practice together. So what we're going to be doing today is rebuilding the Notion homepage with Tailwind and Next.js. And it's just going to be the homepage. In fact, we might not even do all of it, but the goal really isn't to walk away with something that we can take and use in a project. The goal is to practice getting better at CSS, getting better at Tailwind, and just getting better at layout, web design and layout. So that's what we're going to do. This is just practice, so I encourage you to click the link, open the code sandbox, and code along with me. So let's get started. Right now you can see I've got practice with Tailwind starter, and over here in the browser on the right side you can see it's right there. So if I get rid of this and replace it with Notion, press save, this should reload over here, and now you can see Notion right there. So let's get started building this Notion homepage. You can see at the top there is a nav bar, and then there's a big hero section right here. And as we scroll down, there's more sections, but really let's just focus on this first top part for now. Plenty to work on there. First things first, the nav bar. So let's go ahead and create a nav here in our markup. And on the left side of the nav, we're going to have the Notion label, the Notion brand. And then on the right side of the nav, we're going to have all of the links. So let's put all of those links in an unordered list. That's pretty common. And I'm just going to put the first one in there for now. All right, let's just do 3 of them for now. We'll come back to that. Download and remote work. So we'll just leave it like that for now. Now when I click save, let's take a look at what this looks like. You can see here that Tailwind resets all of the default styles in the browser and adds a few base styles of its own. So this is kind of how it looks with absolutely no browser styles. So let's go ahead and first things first, let's make this laid out like this so it's all in a row. So we're going to make the nav flex using flexbox so that everything is laid out in one row. And then I'm going to wrap this left side in a div, the side that has the brand in it. And then I'm going to wrap this right side in a div, the unordered links. And then let's go ahead and say justify between, which is flexbox, which should make these things. You can see how now we have Notion on the left and the 3 items in our list on the right. Now the items in our nav list, let's make those flex as well so that they all are aligned in a row. Alright, let's press that, save. Alright, cool. Now let's add some space in between those, and Tailwind has a nice utility class for that, space x2, which will add just 2 space in between each one. Cool. And for the whole nav, let's give it just a little bit of padding. Let's say P2 for the entire nav. Let's see how that looks. Alright, it's starting to look good. Now let's actually do PY2, which is up and down, vertical, and then PX3, which is horizontal, so that we have just a little more spacing horizontally than we do vertically. Cool. Alright, now if you look at this, when I hover over these, you can see that they have this gray box that happens when you hover over it. So let's make that gray box happen. I'm going to go ahead and abstract this so that we have one component that we can reuse here. So let's call this a nav item. And the nav item is just going to be an li, just like this. And inside it's going to have some text, and then that will allow us to use the nav item right here. So nav item the text is going to be, for this one, product, for this next one, download, and for the next one, remote work. All right, let's save this and make sure it still looks pretty much the same. Cool, still looks the same because nothing really changed here. We just abstracted this li tag into be its own component. And the reason we did that is so that we can add the classes, the Tailwind classes, in just one place, and they'll be applied to all three of these nav items. So for the classes, we want it to, well, first of all, it looks like the text is just a little bit smaller than normal text, and the font is bold, and the color is going to be sort of like a gray, a little bit of a dull gray. So let's save that and see how that looks. There we go. I think that gray may be a little too light, so let's make it 700 and see how that looks. Okay, that's a little better. Now inside, when I hover over, we know we need some padding in there so that we can have that gray box behind it. So let's give the horizontal padding px of 2 and the vertical padding of 1. And then when we hover, let's do a background color of gray 300. And let's round the corners with rounded. And let's see how this looks. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now you'll notice when I hover, it's just a cursor here. It's not actually a link. So let's actually make these a link. So to do that, inside of the li, inside of the list item, we're actually going to add an a tag. And the a tag is going to have an href, which is going to be props.href. And then inside, let's take pretty much the entire class name that we had on the li and actually put it on the a tag. Now, when I hover over it, let's see, let's actually give it the href. So each one's going to have its own link. It's a remote work. We're not going to build out those pages, but we just need it to actually have an href, and now you can see that we get our cursor, our pointer cursor here when we hover over them. Now I do notice that there's a little bit of a fade in transition when you hover over this. It's not immediate, whereas ours is right now. So let's add that fade in transition. So I believe what we do is transition colors, because we want to transition the background color, and then duration 300, I think, for 300 milliseconds. There we go. You can see now there's a transition and it just kind of fades in when we hover over it. Looking pretty good. Okay, let's go do a little bit of work here on the brand. Okay, so that's over here. Let's add next to it a let's add a span, and this span is just going to be a circle that kind of looks like the size of that Notion logo. So let's make this a circle. So we can do height of 6 and height of 6, width 6. Let's do rounded full to make it a circle, and then a background of gray 400. Let's just see what that looks like. Oh, and you know, a span is not a block element, so you can't give it some of those properties, so it needs to be a div. And let's actually make this div an inline block. There we go. We could have done that with the span as well. Okay, cool, looking good. So that gray is kind of like our little logo, if you will. Now we want to center that, so let's add flexbox here. There's a few ways we could center it, but we're going to flex these things. We're going to say items center, so that they are all aligned in the center. And then we will just add a little bit of margin to the Notion text. So margin left 2. Let's add that. All right, cool, looking good. Now I'm really starting to see that our padding is not nearly enough. So let's add a little bit more padding to the entire nav here. Let's actually do P4 for the whole nav. There we go. That's a little bit better. Maybe even still we need a little more, but let's just leave it like that for now. Okay, cool. So let's add the rest of our nav items now that we see that this is looking pretty good. So we have remote work, we have customers, we have pricing and jobs. Alright, I'm going to save that. Alright, let's see these. Yep, looking good. Now, we have the login and sign up over here, and I think what I'm going to do is actually add a second, yes, I think that's what we should do. We should add a second. I'll tell you what, for now, let's just add 2 more nav items. We may want to come back and make those buttons or separate them somehow, but we're just going to make them more nav items for now, just to keep things simple. Log in and sign up. Okay, let's take a look at that. Cool. Alright, now let's get started on this hero section right here. So we have some really big text on the left, and then a call to action email form here on the right. So let's put that below the nav. Let's give ourselves a div. And in this div, I tell you what, I bet you this whole thing is contained, yes. So you can see how it doesn't stretch to be the full width when you go past a certain point. So let's put the whole thing in a container. The container is built into Tailwind, and that will keep things from going too far. Now you can see how everything went to the left here. We actually want it to be centered. So let's say MX Auto on the container, and that will center it. And I probably, yeah, I didn't close that div right there. Alright, now when this recompiles, we should get it centered. Yes, you can see it's centered now. Nice. Okay, now let's work on below the nav. We want to have our div, which is going to be our hero section. So in the hero section, we need 2 parts. We need our left side and our right side. So let's add an H1 for that all-in-one workspace. All-in-one workspace. Oops, no dash there. And that's on the left side. And then on the right side, we're going to have a paragraph that has this text right here. Just copy that and put it right in our paragraph. Tag. Now let's just see what that looks like out of the box. Okay, cool. So you can imagine what we're going to do in this div. Let's see what they do when they go to a small screen size here. Yeah, so they stack these on a small screen. There's 2 or 3 ways we could do this with Tailwind. Let's go ahead and use Flexbox for now, and we may come back and use Grid later, but I think Flexbox will be the simplest and the least amount of markup for this right now. So we're going to flex as a row on desktop, but what I like to do is write my mobile styles first and then follow those with desktop. So on mobile, we're actually just not going to flex at all. So on mobile, we're going to have text center, because it looked like, let's take a look at that one more time on mobile. Yeah, you see how they center it on mobile? So on mobile, we're going to do text center. And then on medium-sized screens, so we'll prefix this with MD:, we'll do text left. And then on medium-sized screens, we will flex as well. So let's take a look at that. So here's our flex when we're on medium-sized screens, and then when we go to small screens, you can see it gets centered right there. Now let's make our all-in-one workspace nice and big. So class name all-in-one workspace is going to be font bold and text 5XL. Let's see how that ends up looking. Alright, that's actually not even quite big enough. Let's try 8XL. Sorry, 8 is not one of them. Let's see, 6XL. There we go. That's a little bit better. And font bolder. See if we get nice bold. No, maybe you can't do it on that big of text. Let's do letting tight so that the lines are a little closer there. Alright, cool. All-in-one workspace, that's pretty close. And then let's make this part right here. So I'm going to make this entire div have a max width of 3XL and MX Auto so that it kind of gets centered. There we go. You can see how it has a max width now, but it's kind of in the center. And then the whole thing, let's give a margin top of 24 because you can see just how much space there is. There we go. Now we have some more space right here. Okay, now this text, the write, plan, collaborate, is a little bigger than normal, so we'll do text XL, and then I think the font is actually even thinner than normal as well. Yeah, you can see. Maybe even more. Let's do text 2XL and see how that looks. No, let's go to keep it at text XL. Cool. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of space in between these two things, so space X3, just to make sure that we've got space between these things. And so we need this text over here on the right, but we also have several other items we want to put over there. So let's wrap those in a div like this. And then below the paragraph, let's go ahead and put an input. And placeholder is going to be enter your email ... Okay, let's see how that looks. There we go. Now, like I said, with Tailwind, it removes all of the default styles, so we're going to need to add our own styles to this input, which we'll do in just a minute. Then let's add our button next to that. It's going to be a submit button, and we'll put this in a form as well. Alright, and this button is going to have some text in it, say get started. And let's wrap this in a form. Alright, let's give this form an on submit. And for now it's going to just console log to do submit form. Alright. And actually we're going to have an event in here. And we're going to say event.prevent default so that the page doesn't reload. Alright. Cool. So now I can type in here and click get started and the page won't reload. Alright. Let's style this input just a little bit here. So let's give it a background as white. Let's make the corners rounded just a little bit. Let's add a border, and the border is going to be a light gray 300. And let's add some padding. Looks like it's equal padding around, so padding 3. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like. There we go. Okay, so actually padding 2 I think would be better. There we go. That's a little better. And then on the button, let's style this button just a little bit. So it looks like their button is, well, first of all, their button is orange. So let's say background, I believe this orange 300. Actually, let's do yellow 700, because I think it has that kind of look to it. Text white, and then text is small, pretty small text there. Oh yeah, that's not the right color at all. Let's go to orange 700 for now, and then let's add our padding too. So px3 and py. You know what? It looks like it might just be p3 all around. So let's see what that looks like. Cool. And it's rounded as well. And then in the form, let's add our spacing between these elements. So space x3. There we go. Okay, and it looks like the button is just ever so slightly taller than the input itself. So I tell you what we're going to do. Let's say, well, first let's try P2 and text SM instead, because that text actually looks a little too small. Okay, that's a little bit better. And then let's give it a border, and that might give it just the right height. So border, it looks like they have kind of a darker border, so border orange 800. And let's just see how that looks. Yeah, that's pretty close. Now as far as getting this actual color, it's like a coral type color. Let's go look at Tailwind. If you press the slash key, it'll allow you to type up here. And then let's go look at our colors. Actually, I went to the wrong place, so let's go to customizing colors. Let's just take a look at some of the built-in colors in Tailwind and see if we can find one. Okay, so red 400. Red 400 is pretty close. So red 400 for the background and red 800 for the border. Let's see. Ooh, way too hard on that border. Let's just try 500. Yeah, that's fine. That's cool. Okay, getting pretty close. Now let's add this part right below it here. Right below our form, we're going to have another paragraph tag. And it's going to say for teams and individuals. And it's going to be kind of a lighter gray, it looks like. So let's make that text a little bit lighter gray. Text gray 600 and text small. Let's see how that looks. Okay, cool. And the only thing we need to add is just a little bit of padding in between the form and these two elements. And so anytime I'm adding this space between stuff, instead of adding margin top to each individual item, if I can at all possible, I try to use the new space classes, utility classes. So let's add space Y3 here, which will just add space in between each item. Okay, that actually looks pretty good. Now let's go see about that font weight for that tall thing. So we have, let's try font black on the big text. So font black, let's see if that works for us. That'd be great, wouldn't it? Oh, it got a little thicker actually. I don't know if you can see that, but let's see, font size. 6XL is the biggest, it's 4 rims. Yeah, I think we would have to install a slightly different font if we wanted it to actually be as thick as Notion's. It's okay, we're not going to do that. We will leave it be. Now, the other thing we need to do here is take a look at how things are looking when you're on a small screen. So let's see, looks like they're hiding all of their nav items on small screen, so let's do that as well. Let's say, let's hide this entire div on a small screen, so you can say hidden on small, and then on medium, we'll just say it's a block. That should hide it. Okay, cool. And we're just not going to bother adding the mobile menu in this little practice session. The other thing they do on mobile is I think it looks like they pull up the margin a little bit. So whereas we added margin top 24 on desktop, we're going to have margin top 12 on mobile, and we'll add a little medium screen size modifier to the 24, so that only applies on medium screens. There we go. So now it's up taller a little bit. Now let's see. Oh wow, so it looks like instead of asking for the email on mobile screen size, they actually have a download from App Store button. So let's do that as well. Let's replace our entire form. So we'll say the form is hidden on mobile, and then on medium screen sizes it's block. Medium block, so now the form should disappear. Okay, yep. And let's above the form add the button that we're going to show. So that's going to be very similar to this, and I can already tell that it's time for me to refactor this. So let's actually, before we start copying that button code, let's create ourselves a little reusable button up here. Button equals props. We're going to return a button, and this is going to be props.type, and then we'll have props.children. Alright, and now let's use that button down here where we already had our button before. So button, we won't need the class name anymore since we just pulled it up there. We will need type. Alright, so that should be fine, and now let's add the button we were about to add right here. This is just going to be a button type of button, and it's going to say download from App Store. Now we should see that here when it comes up. Alright, cool. Download from App Store. That's pretty close. Pretty close. Let's see, is there a hover? Yeah, when you hover over this button it gets a little darker, so let's build that. So background is red, but we're going to add a hover, and the background is going to be red 500 on hover. And let's see how that looks for us. There we go. Let's see. Now, they have a transition? Yep, they also have the transition on that. So let's do transition colors and duration 300 milliseconds. Oop, not 330, 300 milliseconds. Now let's see our duration. There we go. A lot better. All right. Let's go back to desktop size. Now you can see we accidentally left our button then on desktop size. So let's get rid of the button on desktop. And I tell you what, I'm going to actually wrap this in a div. Even though we don't really need to, we could add the class name to the button itself. Let's just wrap this in a div so that we don't, in case we ever want to add stuff here to this button section. So anyway, the class name here for this is going to be hidden on medium screens. So you can see the form is hidden on mobile but shows up on medium, and the button is hidden on medium, and by default it shows up on mobile. So let's just double check. Yep, on mobile shows up, download from App Store, and on medium screens it's gone and the form is in its place. Cool. Okay, I think that's probably pretty good practice for this little round. If you enjoyed this and if you coded along with me, I'd love for you to share your sandbox, your code sandbox with me so I could take a look. I really would love to see it, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you'd like more of this, please let me know, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Never stop practicing. Thank you.